Coming up on Arirang News, President Trump says he'll announce a decision soon on whether to put new tariffs on cars from countries including Korea. Tariffs would likely deal a major blow to Korean carmakers, whose biggest single buyer is America. More than 500,000 Korean students take the test of their lives today, the college entrance exam. Even planes are grounded as the whole country takes steps to ensure test day goes smoothly. And the top generals of South Korea and the U.S. meet in Seoul to discuss defense issues as the U.S. side urges Seoul not to end its military intel sharing pact with Japan. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Today, more than 500,000 young South Koreans are taking the annual National College Entrance Exam. There's about an hour and a half left to go until they're done. Given the level of stress involved, the whole country's taken steps to ensure the students can take the test as comfortably and peacefully as possible. Choi Jung-yoon tells us more.
At this time of the year, Korean students take the college scholastic ability test called Suneung in Korean. On Thursday morning, in what it is the coldest Suneung in 5 years, nearly 550,000 students sat at their once-in-a-lifetime college entrance exams at 1,185 test sites nationwide. The number of test takers this year is down more than 40,000 from last year due to an overall drop in the school-age population. The exams consist of Korean language, mathematics, English, Korean history, and subjects of students' choice in either social or natural science. Some students can selectively take another foreign language or Chinese characters. In Korea, Suneung is a symbol of finalizing 12 years of elementary, middle, and high school education. As a result, determines which university they enter next year. To say the whole academic life of a Korean student leads up to this one day would not be an exaggeration. This, as there's a strong belief in Korean society that the college you attend shapes one's future. As the exam is considered a once-in-a-lifetime challenge, friends, teachers, and parents came to the test sites to give their encouragement.
My son prepared for years to take this test. Some days not going to sleep until 2 in the morning. I hope he gets a good result so that he can go to the college he wants.
I came early this morning to support our seniors. I wish them good luck after all their years of studying.
Nationwide measures are being taken to support the test takers as well. During the morning rush hour, workers in the public sector and some private firms started work an hour later than usual. The country's stock markets has opened and will close an hour later as well. Along with additional subway trains and buses, police officers offered motorcycle rides to students who are running late.
The best drivers have gathered to manage the streets near the test sites and give rides to the test takers who came to the wrong school.
In the afternoon, airplanes are prohibited from taking off or landing during the 25-minute English listening test. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
The top generals of South Korea and the U.S. sat down this morning in Seoul for a round of annual security talks. They're expected to have discussed a range of issues, including the regional security situation and a soon-to-expire military intelligence sharing pact between Seoul and Tokyo. Kim Mo-gyun reports.
The chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff for South Korea and the United States, Generals Park Han-gi and Mark Milley, met in Seoul on Thursday for their annual military committee meeting. It's expected the two sides jointly assess regional security surrounding the Korean peninsula, as well as their joint defense posture. Park was also widely expected to ask his U.S. counterpart for support for Seoul's defense policy measures. But topping the agenda was likely Seoul's decision to terminate its military intel sharing pact with Japan, known as GSOMIA, which expires on November 23rd. Washington wants South Korea to change its mind about ending the pact. Seoul made the decision in August in response to Tokyo's export curbs and a row over Japan's use of Koreans as wartime forced labor. Ahead of Thursday's meeting, Milley hinted to reporters in Japan that the key message from Washington for this whole meeting would be to extend GSOMIA. He said if the pact lapses, it will affect bilateral ties between South Korea and Japan, South Korea and the U.S. and Japan, which can only benefit North Korea and China. The South Korean government has consistently stressed that it's sticking to its gun on GSOMIA unless Japan withdraws its export restrictions against South Korea. Also, with diplomatic sources saying South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa will visit Washington next week to explain Seoul's perspective on Jisomia, it remains to be seen what Thursday's military committee meeting will achieve. However, the results of the meeting will be shared later Thursday. It will be announced again at the Security Consultative meeting set for Friday at South Korea's Defense Ministry. Kim Mo-kyan, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, after North Korea's furious response to the upcoming South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has said the U.S. could change the drills if it helps bring the North back to the dialogue table. Hong Yu reports.
U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Wednesday on a flight en route to Seoul that joint military exercises in South Korea could be altered if it helps to advance a diplomatic deal with North Korea to denuclearize the Korean peninsula.
I think we have to be open to all those things that empower and enable our diplomats to sit down with the North Koreans alongside with our South Korean partners and move the ball forward to a negotiated settlement of the issues that we put on the table.
He didn't elaborate on the adjustments that might be contemplated, but he said it would be done in consultation with the South Korean government. This comes after North Korea threatened to retaliate if the U.S. went ahead with its scheduled military drills with Seoul. The pro-North Korea newspaper Chosun Sinbo on Wednesday said the opportunity for dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. will disappear if a summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump doesn't take place before the end of the year. South Korea and the U.S. previously reduced the scale of their 2018 and 2019 military exercises, hoping it would help convince North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. But the tactic has yet to bear fruit. While refraining to respond to North Korea's opposition, the U.S. reaffirmed the principle that the two sides can hold simultaneous and parallel discussions on the issue of establishing a peace regime and improving relations related to denuclearization and the security of the regime, which the North has demanded. Esper added that the Trump administration takes seriously North Korea's year-end deadline for progress on North Korea-U.S. diplomacy and another Kim-Trump summit. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Moon Jae-in will be meeting at the Blue House Friday afternoon with U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley. Also joining the talks will be South Korea's National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong. They'll likely discuss issues regarding their alliance, including defense cost sharing for American troops stationed here, as well as joint military exercises. But topping the agenda is expected to be Seoul's military pact with Tokyo, Jisomia, which is due to expire next Saturday. Washington's been repeating the importance of extending Jisomia. Esper also told the press today that it's a critical agreement that must be maintained to deal, in his words, with North Korea and China. President Moon will likely reiterate why Seoul is unable to reverse its decision to end the military pact without a change in Japan's attitude on historical and trade issues. Hong Kong this week is seeing the worst clashes yet between pro-democracy protesters and police. And China's foreign ministry on Wednesday denounced a U.S. senator for saying he wants to push forward a bill supporting the protesters. Our Ji-young has more.
Protesters crippled Hong Kong for the third straight day on Wednesday as they blocked roads and train services, forcing businesses to close. Police rained down tear gas and rubber bullets on students and protesters who fought back with Molotov cocktails and fiery arrows dipped in petrol. Hundreds of students have fled after days of violence on several university campuses. Demonstrators braced for more clashes, some armed with javelins, bows, and arrows. The demonstrators put up barricades and used bricks and projectiles to block roads in several places, including the Central Financial District and Mongkok. Some protesters gathered at the Cross Harbor Tunnel toll booths, setting them on fire and vandalizing them. Near a subway station, a 70-year-old resident was hit in the head by a brick-shaped object thrown by protesters and is in critical condition, according to local media. As more disruption is expected on Thursday, Hong Kong subway operators suspended parts of its rail network and the Cross Harbor Tunnel was blocked. The government ordered the suspension of schools from kindergartens to colleges on Thursday for the first time as clashes turned increasingly violent. Meanwhile, U.S. Senator Jim Risch said he supports the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act and said he wants to push forward a bill supporting the protests. This drew an angry response from China on Wednesday. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Yang Sheng criticized the senator by saying that Hong Kong is China's Hong Kong and no external forces should interfere China's internal affairs. Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's national football team is preparing for today's World Cup qualifier against Lebanon. They're looking for victory, of course, but the situation in Lebanon seems rather dangerous, as our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
The South Korean men's football team has arrived in Lebanon for their fourth match of the second round of qualification for the 2022 World Cup. The situation in Lebanon is much more serious than expected, as anti-government protests blocked the highway from the airport into the city, so the South Korean team required a police and military escort to their hotel. Given that the situation is unstable and possibly dangerous, the team have decided not to have their planned formal training session. Head coach Paulo Bento explained that the team aren't taking the Lebanon match lightly. Rather, they canceled the training to make sure the players are in the best condition.
It's better for our team, essentially for our players, preparing the strategy for the game in the quiet place, in the good conditions.
Even in the difficult circumstances, the players showed their confidence, vowing to get the victory.
I believe the players have their own roles to play for every match, and my role, along with our defenders, is to do everything we can not to concede.
Although South Korea is currently top of Group H, there isn't much of a gap between the top three teams. In order for South Korea to reach the next round of qualification as group winners, victory in Lebanon is crucial. South Korea has struggled in the past in matches in Lebanon, but the team says it is ready for today's match, which kicks off at 10 p.m. Korea time. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he will decide soon whether to put tariffs on cars and auto parts, including those from Korea. But reports also say he might delay the decision. Kan Hyung-woo has this story.
The decision over U.S. import tariffs on cars and auto parts might be made soon, according to President Donald Trump. Before his summit with the Turkish leader at the White House on Wednesday local time, Trump told reporters that he has been fully briefed and will make a decision fairly soon, one day ahead of the deadline to act.
Many countries charge us extraordinarily high tariffs or create impossible trade barriers. Impossible. And I'll be honest, European Union, very, very difficult. The barriers they have up are terrible.
Back in May, the U.S. leaders set a deadline of November 14th to decide on whether to impose tariffs on cars and auto parts from the European Union. However, U.S. media outlets have raised the possibility of Trump delaying the decision for another 6 months, citing EU officials and anonymous sources familiar with the White House deliberations. Meanwhile, the South Korean government and auto sector have been closely watching the matter, as additional U.S. import tariffs on Korean vehicles and related parts could severely hurt the industry. Over 30% of all Korean auto exports were sold to the U.S. in 2018. Since last year, the Trump administration has been threatening to slap tariffs of up to 25% on auto imports to defend the U.S. car industry. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's export prices dropped in October due to weak demand for semiconductors and the Korean won strengthening against the U.S. dollar. The Bank of Korea says export prices last month dipped 1.9% on month. But compared to the same month last year, they were down 7.3%. Farmed products fell by about twice as much as manufactured goods. As for imports, prices were down 2.1% on month and 5.7% on year. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell overnight testified before Congress, and his remarks about the U.S. economy were fairly positive. Of course, there's still uncertainty when it comes to trade with China. But with that in mind, how are the stock markets looking today?
Sure. If you look at what Fed Chairman Jerome Powell have said in the Congress on Wednesday, is that the policy is to hold the current rate into the future unless there's some meaningful changes in the outlook. Powell said that policy isn't on a preset course, but officials think the 3 rate cuts are enough of an insurance policy against the downside risk. So most likely the economic growth rate should be fairly stabilized in the future. Based on our analysis, the economy seems to be fairly stable. U.S. economic growth rate will be probably most likely at around 12% rate. And most of the inflation numbers that are coming out is under check. It is slightly higher than expected, but nevertheless, we are seeing core inflation going down from 2.4% to 2.3%, and overall inflation is at below 2% target. So that is indicating that the economies will be fairly stable in the future. Accordingly, the equity market did okay. It really hasn't taken off yet, but nevertheless, it's fairly stable. Dow was up 0.33%, S&P 500 was up 0.07%, Nasdaq was slightly down by 0.05%.
Well, let's zero in on Hong Kong for a minute. Stocks there have not fared as well as other markets this year, to say the least, with the protests now going on for 6 months. What's the story in Hong Kong, and what's your outlook?
Sure. As you said, Hang Seng Index have shown quite significant drop in the past. And yesterday, it dropped the most by 2.6%. It is the worst single-day percentage decline since the beginning of August. And again, today, it is down around 1% territories. Clearly, the news about the continuation of the long-running protest is putting a dent to the economic growth rate of the Hong Kong. And if you talk about the overall, there has been actually firing 2 rounds to the protesters, and then the protester had to have surgeries, and he's in critical conditions. The hospital authority have said that. So there's a concern about this would affect negatively in terms of the economic growth rate of Hong Kong. Of course, Hang Seng Index will be the biggest underperformer according to this type of news flows. We don't see this issue settling down anytime soon, so we do think that the volatility should continue. The volatility will remain to be high until some kind of support comes out from the Chinese government to support the overall Hong Kong economy. And if that's the case, then Hong Kong index should start to go up again. But at the current point in time, we don't see anything that happening anytime soon.
Got it. Well, meanwhile, according to the Bank of Korea, the country's exports in October were fetching lower prices for a second month in a row. Why is that, and what stands out to you about this situation?
Well, clearly, it is because of the global economic growth rate slowing down due to the various trade barriers and trade negotiation and higher tariffs. If you look at the Korea's export prices, it has dropped a second consecutive month in October because of the Korean won appreciations against the U.S. dollars, as well as the overall demand seems to be slowing down somewhat. But interestingly, if you look at the export price decline, the biggest decline comes from the farm products, which tumbled by 3.9% over the cited period, while actually the manufacturing goods dipped only 1.9%. So, which means is that still the competitiveness in the manufacturing industry still remains to be fairly reasonable. Most important thing would be in the future is what's going to happen to the DRAM price and the NAND price. Because of the semiconductor business is a very large part of the Korea's export. The semiconductor index, DXI, showing a decline trend even still in the past several months after a sharp recovery in July. So clearly still there is a lack of demand that's happening at this point in time. But in the future, we do expect the continuous data demand coming from the data center, as well as AI industry jumping quite significantly in terms of the growth. So all that would affect positively in terms of DRAM price. That should have positive implication for the overall export prices in the future.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate your analysis.
Thank you very much.
Now, the number of Korean companies in the world's top 500 by market capitalization is down to just 2. According to the Korea Exchange on Thursday, South Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics is ranked 20th with a market cap of $268 billion US. Major chipmaker SK Hynix is ranked 267th with $52 billion. Apple leads the ranking with a market cap of $1.2 trillion, with Microsoft and Google's Alphabet making up the top 3. At the end of 2010, 8 Korean companies were in the top 500. According to analysts, the fall can be attributed to the shift in industrial structure from manufacturing to IT and Korea's export-dependent economy. The South Korean movie Parasite, which won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, is dazzling audiences in the United States. The buzz around the film in the U.S. has many thinking Parasite might win an Oscar or 2. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The South Korean film industry celebrated its 100th anniversary this year. Despite its century-long history, no South Korean film has ever been nominated for an Academy Award. However, this might all change with South Korean director Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, which won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival earlier this year. Having won the Filmmaker Award at the Hollywood Awards and setting box office records for a foreign film in the U.S., watchers say Parasite has a chance to win not just one, but multiple awards at next year's Oscars. Parasite has the best shot at winning the Academy Award for Best International Feature Film, formerly known as Best Foreign Language Film, prior to the upcoming award ceremony in 2020. The film is expected to go up against the Spanish drama Pain and Glory, directed by Pedro Almodovar. However, critics say Parasite could capture even more awards, such as Best Story, Best Director, and Best Cinematography. Experts say if Parasite wins 1 Oscar or more, the success will pave the way for South Korean movies to penetrate film markets around the globe.
The economic value of South Korean films would be higher in overseas markets. South Korean film companies and filmmakers would also enjoy greater advantages in markets around the world.
The nominations for the Academy Awards will be announced on January 13th. The ceremony itself will take place in Los Angeles on February 9th. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Seoul Metropolitan Government has named 18 foreigners from 14 countries as honorary Seoul citizens. These new Seoulites include people recognized for their charitable work, cultural contributions like books and music, and more. At the awards ceremony on Wednesday, officials said the winners had done a great deal to connect Seoul with their home countries and increased awareness of multicultural families. Mayor Park Won-soon said Seoul will continue to work to improve foreign residents' livelihoods. Seoul has awarded honorary citizenship to non-Koreans every year since 1958. So far, 853 foreigners from almost 100 countries have got the honor. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.